Welcome to Forte's MBA Alumnae Insight Series. Each of these recordings features a panel of successful businesswomen representing diverse industries and career stages, as featured during our Forte MBA forums.
I want to, of course, thank our panelists. I want to thank them all for their time. They're tuning in from many different places, all different times and weather, as we discovered. And so certainly you're going to hear amazing insights this evening. And so I'm going to turn it over to Karen, who is our moderator this evening. And Karen is a Forte board member, so she is certainly an expert on Forte as well. So thank you all so much for joining us, and we look forward to this conversation. So with that, Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. So good evening and welcome to the Alumnae panel. It's also one of my favorite parts of the MBA forum. And hopefully by the time we're done with this panel, you're going to have a great sense from our panelists about what it felt like to make the decision to apply to business school, to apply, and how that experience has really changed the trajectory of their careers. So I'm Karen Korn. As Ashley mentioned, I'm the board chair for Forte, and I'll be your moderator tonight. I'm the head of alternative products at Fidelity Investment, and I've had a 30-plus year career in financial services. When I was sitting in your seat, I had attended Barnard College in New York, where I majored in economics, and then attended Harvard Business School. My husband, who I married during business school, is a radiologist, and I have two grown sons. One is in college and the other is on staff at a congressional office in Washington, D.C. During the quarantine, I've learned how to bake challah, something I had never done, and I also learned to construct crossword puzzles. So I'm using my time wisely. So with that, we can launch into the panel tonight. I'm first going to ask each panelist to introduce herself, and then I'll kick things off with some questions that I think will be of general interest to the audience. If you do have questions, please feel free to pop them into the Q&A screen on your Zoom, and we'll incorporate them at the end if we've got time. So without further ado, let's go on to introductions. Maybe we can start with Sarvi.
Thank you, Karen. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarvi Ahmadi. I graduated from Imperial College of London in summer. Actually, it was September that I graduated. I currently work at Finance-It. It's interesting because tomorrow is actually my 1-year anniversary with Finance-It. I'm based out of Toronto, Canada. And the interesting fact is the way that I learned about my school was through Forte Foundation events that just by accident I attended. So this organization and the mandate of this organization is really close to my heart. I have to say the 2 years of my MBA was the best 2 years for my personal growth. So I'm looking forward to sharing more about it with all of you.
Great, thank you. Maya?
Absolutely. Thanks, Karen. Good evening, everyone. Maya George here. Very excited to be talking with you all this evening. I graduated from UNC Keenan Flagler Business School in the class of 2018. And I had somewhat of a non-traditional path to business school. I started out my career in public health consulting, spent 5 years doing that, and then decided that I wanted to make a career transition and attend business school. 2 years later, I'm now working as a senior manager at Lowe's Home Improvement in the corporate strategy team. Our team works on developing the growth strategy for the company. This is a really exciting position for me, and I couldn't be here without my business school education. So look forward to sharing more about that with all of you this evening.
Erin?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Moore. I graduated from the University of Maryland Maryland, Smith School of Business in 2018. I also have a very non-traditional background. I actually got my bachelor's in meteorology and environmental science, and I thought for sure I was going to be on the Weather Channel. I worked for the National Weather Service and everything, but my career actually took me down the path of sustainability, and I worked in higher education and sustainability for 5 years before deciding to go to business school to really pivot from higher education to corporate. I wanted my career to have an impact on people's lives and to impact products that we use every day. So an MBA was really to help me build up that business acumen. I graduated, like I said, from Maryland 2018, and I went to work for BASF Corporation here in North America, which is the world's largest chemical company. And I actually did their MBA leadership development program for the first 2 years. So if you have questions about development programs and career pivoting, I can talk to you about that. I just completed the program in August, and I'm now the marketing manager for one of our businesses here in North America. So I manage our formulation and performance additives, which is a whole lot of chemistry, but again, being able to talk about an LDP program, leadership development, happy to share a little bit more about my experience as well.
Great. Elena?
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Elena, and I hope, like, from all of our perspectives, the audience, you guys can take away that there's almost no such thing as like a traditional path to business school. I almost say, like, my path wasn't very traditional either, but hearing everybody else's, it sounds like we're all kind of cut from a different cloth. So I'm originally from Houston, Texas. Before business school, I spent 4 years working in public broadcasting. That's like PBS and NPR. I worked for a local station in Houston, and I started out as an executive assistant and worked my way up to be a fundraising manager, fundraising part of the team. In 2016, I decided to go to NYU to focus on the intersection of media and technology. I interned at NBC Universal, but kind of felt like, this isn't really what I expected. Maybe it's not for me. And I took a huge turn and went straight into emerging technology. I now work in cryptocurrencies, which is a pretty crazy industry to be a part of. But I've really enjoyed it. It really helps me continue to fuel my intellectual curiosity, which was definitely a big reason why I went back to grad school, to business school, but then also, like Aaron and some of the other panelists mentioned, build up that business acumen and really start to understand kind of bigger, broader pictures that I hadn't considered before. So yeah, pleasure to be here with everybody today.
Thank you. And last but not least, Ashley.
Sure. So great to be joined with all of these ladies this evening, and really excited to talk to all of you. So my name is Ashley Mackel. I graduated from Columbia Business School in 2017. And prior to business school, I worked in advertising at Ogilvy and Mather, which is an advertising agency in New York. I had varied roles while I was there: marketing strategy, sort of helping clients to understand their business problems and solve through marketing communications, and then also working directly with the CMO, really helping the brand of the agency to be fully digital and seen as a thought leader in the advertising industry. I transitioned to business school specifically because I wanted to move from what we call the sort of agency side to the client side, more specifically working with a global brand. And so sought Columbia out specifically because I wanted to sort of parallel path my interest in marketing across both CPG and luxury retail goods. So while I was in school, I interned at Sephora on Fenty Beauty by Rihanna when it was in development stages. When I came out of school, I did a full pivot. As you'll probably hear, several of us did. I worked initially in marketing at Shake Shack, leading marketing across the Southeast. I'm now based in Atlanta, so that role was based here. And then made another switch into CPG, as I'm now in brand management at the Coca-Cola Company, working on Coca-Cola trademark for North America.
Thank you. I thought we'd kick it off with an open-ended question, some of which you've touched on already, but I think a question that everyone in the audience is wrestling with right now, which is, why do I want to have the MBA? You know, when you were sitting in their shoes, you know, what is it that you convinced yourself that it made sense to stop what you were doing and pursue that MBA? Sarvi, maybe we can start with you on that.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say maybe the reasons I decided to do my MBA initially was somewhat different from what I was hearing from the other people that I was studying for my GMAT for. I had few reasons. One of them was when I was applying for my MBA at the time, I was working at Capital One. So I worked there for 7 years before now I transitioned to finance it. So I have to say, spending about a couple of years in corporate world, I was mostly on the technology and digital ops. I kind of took a step back and looked at what are my strengths and what I learned through either my education and then the work experience at corporate world. And I knew, okay, I'm good in execution. I understand working with the clients. I've launched a couple of projects, but what are the gaps that I have for the type of leader that I want to be and what I want to do in future? And for me, my gaps were, okay, I understand the corporate world, but I never really experienced entrepreneurship. I actually don't know much about it. I'm someone that I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, but that was my only exposure. I never really tried any venture of my own. I never taken a risk to do that. I just read about it, but I didn't know much about it. So I thought, okay, that's one thing that at some point I want to learn about it. The other thing for me was, I came from a background of civil engineering. So I was good in math and I understood that and I learned more about the process management and product management at work, but it's still understanding business, understanding finance. And when it was the budget time in our company and sitting in the meeting with the finance department, I wasn't necessarily the person that understand all the details. And this is something that I think it impacted almost my confidence. It didn't really impact the work that I was doing because I was good at the work that I was doing as someone in technology. But I was thinking 10 years from now, if I am an executive sitting in a boardroom, especially as a woman, do I want to be the person that I always have to rely on the CFO that I work with? Or do I want to be the person to look at the financial and budget sheet and then be able to ask really intelligent questions? So to me, that highlighted the gap that I have, that I thought, okay, I probably need to address that. And then the last thing for me was, which I think was very personal, I think I always had back of my mind that at some point I want to get my MBA. It was just something that on a personal level, it was important to me. And now that I completed it, I think there is something very satisfying, especially as a woman, sitting in meetings and hearing everyone's credential. And I have to say, check, I got the MBA, I have it. But aside from that, I think really understanding where I want to be in future and where I was at that point and identifying the gaps. And for me, the MBA was just an apparent choice. And I'm a very result-focused person. So I was thinking, what is the fastest way that I can accomplish what I want? And for me, doing a 2-year MBA, which I did it part-time, if I wanted to do it full-time at Imperial, it would have been 1 year. It was a good choice for me. And I also, the last thing I have to say, I think those were the reasons that I went to my MBA, and then I got so much more out of it as I went through the experience. One thing that I experienced is when you work somewhere and you kind of do the same thing, maybe even change roles in one company, you end up thinking almost same as a lot of people around you. So I was also craving having that diversity of thought and getting exposure to things that maybe normally in my day-to-day and at my work, I wouldn't have necessarily have that. And through my experience at Imperial, definitely I got that. And I think that was a big point for me to learn a lot and experience a lot.
Great. Maya, how was your story similar?
I think my story was a little different from Sarvi's. And I would say for me, going into the MBA, I think I had two sort of very tactical reasons why I wanted to do an MBA. And now looking back 2 years later, I think there are also 2 other really great benefits to doing an MBA that I've gained an appreciation for 2 years outside of business school, which I didn't really have going in. But thinking about it going in, I mentioned earlier I had a non-traditional background. So I started my career in public health consulting. And I started out thinking that I really wanted to work on sort of the technical side of public health. I wanted to be kind of a public health expert. Spent 5 years doing that, and I realized that I was really a lot more interested in sort of the business problems that my clients were facing, and needed to, if that was an area that I wanted to focus my career on, I realized sort of tactically I would need to build up some true business skills and build on a core business toolkit in order to be able to focus on that for the rest of my career. So that was the first reason why I did it. The second sort of tactical reason is I really wanted to increase my earnings potential. I think that's something that we don't talk about a lot of the time, but I sort of knew that the salary that I could expect to make without an MBA and with an MBA, there was a significant differential in that. For me, that was one of the major considerations, I would say, going into doing my MBA. But looking back 2 years later, I think 2 things that I've really come to appreciate that an MBA gives you that I didn't think about at the time are, one, it really builds on very valuable leadership skills that I think that you don't necessarily appreciate even in your first job out of business school. But if you sort of look 10 years, 15 years out, as I look at role models at my company or others that I've come across in my career since leaving business school, I think that can be a very valuable skill that bears fruit even as you kind of more and more as you progress along your career. I think it leads to faster promotions and just being a very valuable member of the team, especially as you advance in your career. Second, I know this is something that I think we're going to talk about a little bit later, but the network that you get out of business school is something that's incredibly valuable. And again, I think that's something which you really get an appreciation for even 10 or 15 years outside of business school when you're looking for new job opportunities or considering moving to a new city. And you can sort of tap that network to help you make those transitions. So 2 very tactical reasons going in and 2 sort of retrospective reasons why I think it's very valuable for people to do an MBA a couple of years outside of business school.
So let's get down to brass tacks here. Here's the question that I think everyone in the audience really has, which is, it's great to sort of decide you want to go, but boy, how do you put that into action with the application process? Whether it's, studying for the GMAT, whether it's figuring out where to apply, it's the essays, it's keeping yourself on track, it's asking for the recommendations. So let's pivot to that and, think about what challenges you faced, what tactics you used to get through it. If you could give advice to your then self, what would it be to help you, get through that process? Why don't we start with Elena?
Yeah, so this draws a little bit on what Sarvi mentioned in her answer. The MBA application process is really a marathon. I wish, really tactically, that I had asked for help earlier in the application process. Either by connecting with networks like Forte or asking people in my community. My parents didn't go to business school, and I think I have one distant uncle who maybe did, but I was really on my own. My main resource was Reddit, actually, to kind of ask around, hey, should I do this? What should I think about? And so I would definitely encourage people, if you're in this audience, you're already taking the right steps. And then I think another thing about the application journey is that the process can take a lot longer than people initially realize. And if I could give people listening just one huge piece of advice is don't quit at the first sign of failure. You know, I told myself in the application process time and time again, like, if this was easy, everybody would have an MBA. If this was easy, everybody would do it. And I remember, like, I took the GMAT 3 times. It is not, it's not good on your ego. It's really great exercise in humility. But I think it also shows you that if you put in the work, the benefits that you get out of it are really understanding like what it takes to advance yourself, not just professionally, but as a person, and also like how you can really realize your full potential. That was one of the big reasons why I committed myself to the MBA goal. I set it for myself, and then afterwards I was like, it really does feel like running a marathon. Like, seems impossible at first, but then bit by bit, you chip away at it.
Ashley, how about you?
Sure. So definitely echo everyone's sentiments. I think for me specifically, starting my career out in advertising, an industry that I still love and have, you know, a ton of affinity for, I could tell that the writing on the wall was changing in the industry. And I really wanted to prepare myself to have a diversified set of skills. I didn't want to have sort of decisions made for me in terms of how clients are billing for services, utilizing agencies. You know, I started my career in the fall of 2008. So I've always sort of had a tempered sense of, you know, what's to come, that change is inevitable. And so more than anything, really just wanted to diversify my ability as a marketer. And I'll also say, you know, we all have, you know, talked about our experience as a non-traditional student. For me, I definitely had very little business acumen in terms of the classroom ahead of the MBA. I went to a women's college and studied comparative women's studies while I was there. And so, you know, definitely was very far away from strategy, from business, from accounting when I was in school. And then in terms of sort of like my own experience day to day, aside from studying with women and going to women's college, I also went to a girls' school growing up. So I wanted to have a different experience in the classroom too, and having, you know, classmates who weren't all girls or women was definitely a different experience for me too, and one that I knew that I would need if I truly wanted to advance in a corporate setting.
Ashley, any advice you would have about the application process for our audience?
Sure. So this is something that worked for me. I mentioned earlier that I was really keen on retail and luxury goods. I made a really finite list of all of the schools that I thought, you know, excelled in that genre specifically. And I narrowed it down to 5 schools and went to all of their retail and luxury goods conferences. I saw that as a way to, you know, get to know the students on campus, what their focus was, get to also have a sense of the alumni population, where they were working currently and how they sort of gave back to the school, and also a sense of the professors. What was the curriculum in place? What were sort of the connections to that industry presently? And I found, you know, while I'm not currently working in retail and luxury goods, it was a really good exercise for me to get to know the campus community, which absolutely extended itself to the ultimate decision that I made to go to Columbia.
Great. Aaron, I saw you shaking your head when Elena was talking around some of the challenges of
Shaking or nodding?
nodding.
Okay, I was like, no, I'm agreeing.
The
Yes.
nodding, yes, and the shaking, the no. Okay, the yes
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yes.
And so it sounds like some of that resonated with you. What could you add around the application process, challenges, and advice for our audience?
Well, specifically for me, I think coming from a technical background with having a degree in meteorology, a very heavy focus in math and science, calculus, differential equations, chemistry. So there's a certain aspect of business or a different way of thinking when it comes to business that you have to train yourself into. So since I was already in higher education, I took advantage of being an employee at a university and talking to people who were in business schools. So before I got my MBA, I worked at Cornell University, and I connected there with the Johnson School and with MBA students there, MBA candidates. One, to understand that program, to see if it was a program I was interested in and if I wanted to stay in Ithaca, New York for 2 more years. And then also just to understand how they prepared for the MBA program, why they chose the program, and some of the things to look for in a program. So that helped me as well. So regardless of whether it's current MBA candidates, but taking advantage of whoever your mentors are to help you through your thinking for your career path and your career development is also important, because that's how you grow and build your network. You're already starting to leverage a network prior to business school. And when you join a business school, it's not just about the knowledge or the book knowledge you gain, but also the network that you're going to be a part of that's going to follow you throughout your career. So the more you can learn how to leverage your network and activate them at different points in your career, I think that's that's part of the fruit that you'll harvest from being part of an MBA program. Also, because of my background, I also took a class or two in accounting. I needed to see exactly what I was getting myself into. And so I took a night class in accounting. That was also a class that I could submit a transcript for as part of my application. So it helped bolster my application, not to have all of this math and science, but to also show that I could handle a business course, and, was already starting to have that foundation as well. Especially if you come from a non-traditional background, you can always find maybe a cheap online class or something from a community college, but that's just a way to show that you can handle the coursework, or that you're preparing for business school. And also, I think one thing, the hardest piece, not just the GMAT, it's pretty challenging. It is that was definitely something that you have to train yourself for. And when I say train, I mean mentally and physically. Like you need to train, or when you are prepping for the tests, you actually need to train yourself to manage that test, or take that test, or sit somewhere for 3+ hours without distractions. That's the only way that, in my opinion, that's the only way that you will continue to get better at that test. But also the essay. The essay takes a lot of self-reflection, and you have to be honest with yourself. It's going to require a little bit of self-awareness. It may require you, depending on the topic, to talk to some people to gain their perspective on how you may be articulating your story, because it's personal. I think that the essay in general should show like why you want to get an MBA, how an MBA is going to help you beyond the program, and then also what you can bring to the program, because it's not just about, what you get from it, or how you can leverage the MBA, or the study abroad opportunities, or the coursework. It's also about what you can give back to that program, because again, you're becoming part of a broader network. And so you really do need to reflect on what it is that's motivating you, the impact that you want to have with your career, and the impact you want to have at the school. And that took me a little while to grasp. So if you're going to apply to different schools, I only applied to like 3 or 4 schools, because I was very specific about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be. But if you're applying to multiple schools, that is something that you really have to think about and articulate that maybe in a different way, depending on the prompts and depending on the culture of the school.
Thank you.
That's all I wanted to add.
Lena, it looks like you've got something to add on the GMAT front, or was that the topic? Yeah.
I just wanted to, yes, we've been talking about the GMAT a lot, and I want to kind of share my personal experience with how I prepared for that. But before I get into that, just want to stress that is one of several components of the application process. So I've seen a lot of friends of mine just kind of get so dejected or cut out entirely, because the GMAT is something that really was a challenge for them. And so I think it's, I have a few kind of notes that I wanted to share with how I went about this. So have an honest conversation with yourself. That's a little bit of what Erin was talking about when kind of assessing like how much work you want to put into this process. Because I think everybody starts with taking a GMAT practice test, right? Or a GRE, if that test is also a really good resource for people who want to try out different formats. So if you're going to prep for this, knowing it's just one part of your whole application and you're a whole complete person, but this one little number is definitely going to bug you for the entire application journey. Okay, so you take the practice test and you're going to see the number and you're going to feel some kind of way about it. I think before taking any other step, just have an honest conversation with yourself with how realistic, what you would have to commit to change that number. And if you can commit 4 hours a week, if you can commit, give yourself kind of a training schedule. And then that's the commitment that you're willing to make. I think it's not necessarily healthy to let this process take over your whole life. That doesn't usually serve you. I've never seen anybody like increase their points like 400% because they quit their job, went into a little hole and just did nothing but GMAT or studying. So once you kind of figure out the improvement curve, like what's likely to improve, then I think you can figure out like a schedule that works within your other demands or your other life. Some people are married, some people have children, some people take care of other dependents in their family. So your GMAT schedule has to work within what you already do on a day-to-day basis. The other thing that I think helped me in my GMAT application process is kind of taking it really slow. So I took a test and then I gave myself a long run up between taking the next test. I wouldn't recommend taking a test one after the other. That process can be quite expensive and you can get dejected pretty easily if you're not seeing the progress that you had in mind. I think one last note on preparing for the GMAT, there are a lot of resources out there and different things work for different people. So some people did a self-guided study guide that works for some people, it doesn't work for others. I hired a tutor and then after taking a test realized the tutor didn't really make a big impact. So then and that's okay, I just moved on to the next one. And the time that I got my best score was actually the time that I was most relaxed. So I went on vacation, I didn't take any of my study books or flashcards with me, and I came back kind of fresh-eyed and got the best score after that time. So anything can happen in your application process, and the GMAT is definitely can feel like a bump in the road. One time the internet cut out like right in the middle of my exam. So just don't let it be the blocker from you achieving your full potential. And for so many women, the MBA is a really powerful stepping stone for that. So I hope that's helpful in terms of GMAT tips and tricks. But yeah, study hard, study often, and give yourself a break. Be kind to yourself.
Thank you. That's a lot of good advice and I think encouragement. Hopefully everyone in the audience, can see themselves in one of these stories and, also see themselves going through some of these tactics to get through the application process. As we're coming up towards the end of our time, I wanted to make sure we could talk a little bit about life after business school, and in particular, the importance of the MBA network. I think that, many people I've talked to say, the most surprising thing about what they got out of business school was the people they did it with. Not to denigrate the subject matter they study, but the people, the connections, what they've learned from their peers stuck with them. So I was hoping we could do rapid fire answers, to finish up the panel, starting with Sarvi around tell us something about your network or your peers and how it's impacted your life after business school.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we had, I think I have the privilege of having a very diverse cohort that we're still in touch. And we tried a lot of different things during the MBA that I probably wouldn't have. One of my classmates, he reached out to a few of us while we were in school, and he was very much passionate about voice technology. And I did not know much about voice technology at that point. He started a consultancy group. He's actually still like going strong and started a company. But through him, we managed to learn a lot about voice technology, and he managed to get a couple of clients. We've done a number of projects within our school that were really valuable. I was actually through work getting invited to an event today that I said, wait a minute, I did actually a project at school with Marks and Spencer. And it was interesting that now it's kind of coming back together. I think specifically for myself, Imperial was very much supportive of, through the Forte Foundations, the events that we wanted to have for advancement of women and making sure that we create a more that we're an environment around diversity and inclusion and the events that we had. So definitely my network, not only through my class, but even through the Imperial School and through the staff and through the professors, I got a lot of support. I would say this is not directly related to the network, but make the most out of the 2 years or 1 year, however long your program is. It will be over before you know it. You work so hard and spend a lot of time and money on it. Enjoy every moment of it, and all of the effort that you're putting into your application, it will all pay off. You will get into the program that is really meant for you. And once you get in there, try to find all of the opportunities and make the most of it, because that probably is going to be the only time in your career and your life that you will have dedicated to just educating yourself and making yourself a better person and your growth. So all of the schools, they offer tremendous programs. All of the schools, they have, in addition to Forte, also tons of support around future female leaders in business world, and especially now in technology. So take advantage of those opportunities. Don't let them go by quickly. And there are also tons of financial support that you can get.
Maya, how about you? How have you leveraged your network?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many ways, personally and professionally, I think that the network has paid off. But since we're doing rapid fire, I'll just talk about probably the best example. Immediately after business school, I worked in, I took a job in consulting with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I was there for 1.5 years. After 1.5 years, started looking around at other options, kind of felt like I wanted to change, and spoke to some of my business school colleagues, one of whom reached out to me about an opportunity at his company, Lowe's Home Improvement, and referred me for the role that I'm in today. So very clear example of how my network definitely paid off. And I think that's actually quite common. I'm not the only person in my class who that's happened to. So.
And kudos to you for taking that first step of reaching out, which can be the hardest one, right? Which is to ask for that help. Ashley, can you bring us home? Can you finish us up with your thoughts on the network and how that's enhanced your life after MBA?
Sure. So I mentioned how I went to several conferences across different schools just to really get a feel of campus and curriculum. I naturally am a people person and love to just sort of get to know other people, whether it be in like a coffee chat, sort of mentor-mentee style, or peers. And across all of those conferences, when I was meeting other prospective students, I stayed in contact with them just to, keep each other motivated through the application process. And ultimately, when we wound up in different schools across the country, stayed in touch about the internship application process, the long-term life after business school job application process, and we continue to stay in touch. So, business school is not just your immediate network of the school that you attend, it's that wider network, that class that you go through across all different schools, and we continue to stay in touch. So as you all are getting to know each other in the Zoom chat and just wider in other Forte events, definitely stay in touch with one another, motivate each other, and look forward to celebrating each other's successes initially through the business school process and really for life, because the sort of coffee chats, those sort of circles to get to know other people and prospective employers, it never ends. So it's just really good to reinforce those relationships now.
Well, thank you, panelists, for all the great advice. If I have to sum up what I think I learned from you today, it's really all about supporting yourself in making, this important career journey. It's supporting yourself at the beginning to have the confidence to say, I can see myself in a successful business career. I can see myself in business school, to even take that first step, come to a forum, reach out to your peers, educate yourself, and trust yourself that you can do it. And it's a theme of supporting yourself through the application process, allocating the time that you need, seeking out the resources, GMAT prep, the Forte MBA launch, a community of peers, what you might find at your workplace, what you might find with connections from college, but to give yourself the time and the support to get through what is a rigorous, 9-month plus process. And lastly, to support yourself after MBA by nourishing and maintaining the peer relationships that you've made, and having the confidence and initiative to reach out, get help, and take advantage of it. So thank you so much for your great input. I know the audience really appreciated it, and best wishes to all of you as you continue on with these exciting careers.